Hello everyone, and welcome back to FluxFolio Finance. As we witness the opening salvos of what is effectively World War III, we have to move beyond the headlines and start understanding the deeper mechanics driving this conflict. Today we are using game theory, the study of strategic decision-making, where the outcome for one player depends entirely on the actions of others, to analyze the escalating war between the United States, Israel, and Iran. By applying game theory, we can move past the fog of war and begin making grounded predictions based on geography, economics, and ideology. Let's begin with the trigger and the psychology of martyrdom. The war began with a decapitation strike against Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. From the perspective of Washington and Tel Aviv, this may appear to be a strategic success. But game theory suggests they may have badly miscalculated the Iranian response. In the Shia faith, one of the deepest values that galvanizes action is martyrdom. From the Iranian point of view, this is not a conventional war of economics or even resistance. This is a jihad. By killing the leader, the West may have provided something even more powerful than fear. It may have provided a unifying act of self-sacrifice, a symbol powerful enough to drive a population to fight to the death. And that changes the entire structure of the conflict. Because now, this becomes a high-stakes game of chicken, where one side, the Iranians, may be ideologically committed to total war, while the opposing side remains far more focused on material preservation, political calculation, and strategic limits. And that takes us to the second layer of this conflict, the asymmetry of modern warfare. The most striking feature of this war is asymmetry. Asymmetry happens when two sides fight entirely different kinds of war, using completely different techniques, because one side is vastly stronger in conventional resources. The United States still possesses a global empire and a massive military machine built during the Cold War. But that machine was designed largely for flexing power, for displaying expensive and overwhelming weapon systems to deter enemies, not necessarily for surviving a 21st century war of attrition. Take the Shahed drone. Iran can produce one for around $50,000. It is cheap, simple to manufacture, and can be launched from a plain truck hidden almost anywhere in the Iranian mountains. Now compare that to the American response. To stop these drones, the United States relies on THAAD and Patriot missile systems. A single interceptor missile costs around $1 million. And because these interceptors do not always hit their target, the United States may end up spending $3 million to destroy a drone that cost just $50,000 to make. Mathematically, this is absurd. It is the kind of strategy that slowly bankrupts the stronger player, while allowing the weaker player to remain resilient. And once you understand that, the next part becomes unavoidable. Geography. Look at the map. Even if you knew nothing about the weapons being used, geography alone tells you how this war is likely to unfold. At the center of everything sits the Strait of Hormuz. It is only 33 kilometers wide, and through that narrow passage flows 20% of the world's oil. Major Asian economies depend on this route with stunning intensity. India gets 60% of its oil through Hormuz. China gets 40%. Japan gets 75%. Iran has already closed the strait. This is not a symbolic move. It is a direct attempt to strangle the global economy, and more specifically, to bankrupt the American empire by attacking the circulation system of global energy. And that leads to the next question. Why is the American empire so vulnerable here? The answer is the petrodollar. The United States dollar derives an enormous part of its global power from the fact that Gulf Cooperation Council nations, countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, insist that oil be purchased in dollars. The Gulf Cooperation Council is not just another regional bloc. It is the linchpin of American financial power. These countries sell oil for dollars, and then recycle those dollars back into the American system, especially into United States equities and financial markets. In fact, a significant portion of the recent rise in artificial intelligence giants such as Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, and Apple has been fueled by Gulf capital. That makes Iran's game plan brutally simple. Destroy the Gulf Cooperation Council's ability to function. If Iran attacks Gulf oil fields or financial centers like Dubai, these states will be forced to pull capital inward just to survive. And if that happens, the United States stock market, one of the central engines of American economic power, could face a violent collapse, opening the door to depression-level conditions. But the war becomes even darker when we move from oil to water, because both sides hold what amounts to a nuclear option of survival. The Gulf Cooperation Council is, in many ways, an artificial construct. It has very limited natural food and water. Roughly 60% of its fresh water comes from desalination plants. These plants are large, fixed, and extremely vulnerable. A single $50,000 drone can take one out. If Iran destroys these facilities, entire Gulf cities could become uninhabitable almost overnight. And in places like Dubai, where around 90% of the population consists of expatriates, that would trigger mass flight. But Iran has its own weakness. Iran may be a mountain fortress, but it is also a mountain prison. The country already suffers from severe water stress and a shrinking water supply, something visible in the disappearance of Lake Urmia. That gives the West its own survival strategy. Target Iran's dams and reservoirs. Make the country itself increasingly unlivable. This is not just military strategy. It is environmental fragmentation as warfare, an attempt to break Iran not only as a military power, but as a coherent nation-state. And once we arrive there, we reach the ultimate game theory result. What is the actual end game for each side? For the American and Israeli side, the strategy appears to be built around Iran's ethnic diversity. By destroying infrastructure and supporting ethnic minorities in the borderlands, the hope is to fracture Iran into smaller, competing enclaves, territories divided by ethnicity, locked in permanent struggle over water and survival. In other words, the goal is not simply to defeat Iran. It is to end Iran as a viable long-term threat. But Iran has its own civilizational objective. Its strategy is to create what could be called Pax Islamica. By rallying Shia populations across the region, and by overthrowing the unpopular dictatorships in the Muslim world that function as American clients, Iran seeks to become the center of a newly unified Islamic order. That is the real ideological war now unfolding beneath the military one. And this is why the conflict cannot remain local. This is not a contained war. This is the opening structure of World War III. Europe is being dragged in because it can no longer rely on Russian energy and is now deeply dependent on the Gulf. If the Gulf Cooperation Council breaks, Europe breaks with it. Russia cannot allow Iran to fall, because Moscow understands that if Iran collapses, it may be next. What we are watching is a decentralized, high-stakes war in which traditional American shock and awe tactics are increasingly ineffective against a decentralized Iranian command structure. Because in this kind of war, if you remove the head in Tehran, the body may continue fighting. And that is what makes this moment so dangerous. We are now in a scenario where both sides possess the capacity for mutual destruction. The world as we know it may never look the same again. We will continue using game theory to track these developments as they unfold in real time. Thank you for watching FluxFolio Finance. Goodbye for now, and stay sharp.